Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guest today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. And today's episode is going to be a good one about mastering engagement and how to speak to prospects and audience, whoever you're speaking to in your business, so that you can connect with them and actually get your message heard in a way that they want to take action on that message. I have a very special guest with me, David Doerrier. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon. This is such an honor. I have known you for a while, and I have been looking forward to this opportunity. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. Me and David are actually part of a networking group, a B2B networking group called The Connective. We'll throw that link down in the chat if you want to check that out too, or in the description, excuse me. But David, I am excited to have you here because this is a topic that I'm sure scares a lot of people, to be, just quite honest about it. Communicating and speaking in front of an audience, even if it's one-to-one at a networking group, in person or virtual, a lot of people get hung up on that. And I'm curious, where do you typically meet people in the marketplace, and where's the generally accepted skill level in terms of communication, if you will?
So great question right out of the box. Thank you so much, Brandon. So so I guess let me unwrap that. So where is people, I guess one of the questions, where are people struggling the most in communication? Was that one of the questions buried in there?
It was buried in there, but yeah, you pulled it out. I like that.
So where are people struggling the most? I think the most is understanding their audience and understanding what is their current understanding of what it is that you're going to be speaking about. Let's take an average networking event where now someone, one of the members, is asked to stand up and give a presentation, 5 minutes, 4 minutes, or whatever it happens to be. So us as subject matter experts, we come to that stage with an enormous amount of information. We know what we're talking about. We know we can follow that storyline and so on that's going on in our heads. But if we're not understanding who our audience is and what their current understanding is of what we're talking about, we're going to easily overwhelm them. So to answer your question, number one is to understand your audience.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like speaking 101, right? But we often overlook it. The question there is, how do you really take all this complex knowledge as a subject matter expert, like you said, and understand where your audience is? I think that's maybe the more complex part, because you walk into a room, sometimes you don't know who's in that room. You don't know if they've heard about what you do. You might be a sparkly unicorn and nobody's heard about what you do. That's probably the best case scenario. Right. But how do you sort to judge where people are at and if they're even hearing what you're saying and comprehending what you're saying?
Yeah, that's another excellent question. So where are those folks? I use in this analogy of understanding one of my 8 principles of engagement. I've got the book, I look for it. That's why I flinch behind me. One of the principles is the principle of complexity. And that's all about understanding where your audience is in the swimming pool. I'm sure you may have experienced as a student or someone sitting in an audience where whoever is presenting just spoke just right over your head. And I would imagine that would feel like you're drowning in a swimming pool. So the principle of complexity is understanding where is your audience in that pool. So how do you find out where they are? There's lots of ways, but using your scenario of I just showed up and I have no idea. I know what I'm going to talk about, but I have no idea what my audience. My suggestion is open up with questions. Who here has ever worked with this software before? Great. I could use follow-up questions. Well, Brandon, you raised your hand. How have you used this software in the past? So I can gauge my audience that way. So another, to sprinkle in some other takeaways from that, by using questions up front, you're also accomplishing a couple of other things that you may not be aware of. Yes, you're gauging your audience, but you're also creating engagement with the audience immediately by asking a question, by getting your audience to do something, to respond immediately. The third thing that you get out of this, many times people say, I'm most nervous when I first get up on that stage, but after a while, I kind of settle in after a while. Well, great. Here's a technique that you can use to work through that nervousness. Ask a question. Ask a question, you're accomplishing three things. You're gauging your audience, you're working through that anxiety in the beginning, and you're also creating engagement.
I love that. Well, let's take the other side of maybe a networking event or a networking group, and it's the one-to-one aspect, right? You go into this event, maybe it's a new room for you. I know a lot of our listeners, they engage in networking, whether it's virtual, in person, or they go to events. That can also be stressful for people. It's a little bit easier because you don't have to gauge where the whole audience is with your message, but you do have to keep that one person engaged with your conversation. What are some ways to approach those types of conversations?
That's another great question. So that one-on-one of creating that engagement with that one-on-one and continuing with that engagement with that one-on-one. This is an area that I had to work at, and I'm still working at, is my networking skills. I'm not a born networker. I ended up in the business of communication through a variety of different things that have happened to me in the past, with military, radio, broadcasting, theater, ending up in corporate training. But I started my life as a shy, pimply kid on Long Island, New York, that had no desire to be up in front of people. I wanted to live in a cave for the rest of my life, but I ended up in front of people, so I got to figure this thing out. So what I do, my trick is I ask questions. I just ask a bunch of, hey, how are you doing? I see their name tag. Tell me about your human OP. What's that all about? How long have you been in this networking group? What are you looking to get out of it? I just ask questions. I'm not saying 9 times out of 10, but many times people don't ask me questions. It's all about them. So fine, you talk. And then I come away looking like a hero because, hey, he's a great guy. He listened to everything I had to say.
Now, what do you do with that information? Because I've been in those conversations in those rooms. I am guilty of loving to ask questions because I'm just naturally curious. I want to hear about the other person, and then I have all this information. And me personally, I do very little with it. I remember it well, so the next time I see that person, I remember and I can pick up the conversation. But I don't necessarily do anything with it to convert it into a business or a referral or anything like that. That's my downfall, not yours. How do you take that information and actually leverage it for success in business?
Great question. So to make sure I understand the question, now that I've had that interaction at the one-on-one, and now it's time to leave the one-on-one, what do I do with that? What do I do with that information? I definitely try to leave with a business card or an electronic business card. And let me also back up that if I find that the conversation is really sparking some it's firing off some things in my head saying, this is someone I really want to get to know, and I'd like to take some next steps in creating this relationship. Now, I'm not trying to sell them or anything, but I see that there's potential. Then I'm going to chime in and I'm going to start talking and so on. But what do I do after? So yes, definitely getting a business card, letting them know I'm going to follow up if we're not connected on LinkedIn yet. And you mentioned the connective. If this is someone that I feel would look for an opportunity to do some additional networking, I'll follow up with that information as well. So I think that, this is an area that, I struggle with. I think, like many other people, is that follow-up. Okay, I sent that first email, but now what do I do? So yes, coming up with some sort of a system and process.
Yeah, I like it. All right, so we talked about the one principle from your book about complexity and simplifying your message. You said you had 8 principles. Why don't you pick another one or two that are just absolutely crucial for the audience to understand?
Yes, great question. So the one of them would be the principle of ownership. This is where your audience is saying to themselves, what's in it for me? The WIFM, WIIFM. An analogy here is that imagine yourself as a facilitator. You're facing your crowd, and your crowd, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, we're all standing on a platform at a train station. Behind me, as the facilitator, behind me is a train. So my job as the facilitator, the speaker, the salesperson, is to motivate my audience enough that they say that they want to listen. that they have heard something enough in my opening that said, okay, I'm open to listen. So here we've got to motivate them to get on that train to take this journey with us. So the principle of ownership is getting your audience to take ownership to listen. And the responsibility, there is responsibility on the audience to take ownership, but the majority of that responsibility is on the facilitator, on the salesperson, on the speaker, to set that stage that says, the audience says, yep, I see the value. Yep, I see where we're going. I want to take that ride.
Yeah, so you mentioned questions before in your intro, especially how it tackles a number of problems or challenges. This would be another area where I could see questions being very useful, is it gets the audience engaged. You're asking them questions, they're immediately engaged in that presentation. I've seen a number of presentations from people where, and it could be keynote speakers, where they have a 90-minute presentation and it's a prepared, scripted talk and nobody's engaged. No matter how well animated they are or how famous of a speaker they are, they don't connect to the what's in it for me principle. So how do you, as when you're speaking, and some of these talks could be short, like you said, 4 or 5 minutes, some of them could be up to 90 minutes long. Is there a formula or a strategy where you constantly re-engage with the audience and just check in and make sure they're still understanding what's in it for me?
Well, there's that key word you said right there almost at the end, was understanding. How do you check for understanding with your audience? Now, as a trainer, my background originated with training and development, designing training, delivering training, training trainers to train. But in a training environment, you have a different type of format there where I can ask those questions. I can physically make them do something and say, okay, prove it to me that you can actually do this task that we just learned. So in a training situation, I'm doing a lot of checking in before I move on to the next. Okay, now that we've covered this, and this, what did you take away from the most important part of speaking? If everybody gets it wrong, well, hold on a second. We got to go back and we got to redo that. So that's how I can check in. Now, doing a lecture, so a lot of things were packed in that one as well. So when you were talking about it, one of the other principles that came to me was the principle of relevance. How do you make sure that this is going to stick? Yeah, there's a lot of pieces to make sure it's going to stick. But one of them is it's got to be relevant to your audience. It's got, they need to put the connection in there. So when it comes to emotion, the other piece of it is, another one of the principles is the principle of impact. And this is where your audience is feeling that they're impacted by something. I'm throwing a lot of these principles right at you like a machine gun here. But relevance and impact is going to make it stick. Because if your audience can feel it, taste it, smell it, experience it, they're right there with you. They're in the story.
I feel like if we keep talking, you're going to give away the whole book here. What was that, 3 or 4 principles now? Which is not a problem, right?
I think we got 4 of them in there. I got to remind myself which ones. So so here we go. So we went through the principle of ownership, the principle of impact, the principle of complexity and relevance. Let's talk about this one. And I think I just demonstrated it. And that's the principle of repetition. Mm-hmm. And here, again, subject matter experts. We know this stuff. And a lot of times you'll hear someone speak and they just go from A to Z with no stops in between and say, okay, I'm out of here. Bye-bye, folks. But the principle of repetition, the simplest, one of the easiest ways is to put in a conclusion. Today, we talked about the number one rule when it comes to public speaking is to know your audience. Remember that swimming pool. We also talked about the principle of ownership, getting your audience to say when they say what's in it for me, they see what's in it for me. The principle of relevance and how that's important with your audience, and also the repetition. So putting in some sort of conclusion, but there's other tricks that you can also do along the way.
I love it. Well, I don't want to ruin your conclusion. You did your job for me. You perfectly summed up this episode, David. But no, seriously, this is great. And these tips are, they're more than tips. They're strategies. And it's something you really, really need to understand, especially if you want to go to networking groups, get on stage, go on podcasts, and connect with an audience. So I know you have a book, you have an ebook, you have a ton of resources for people. Where can the audience go to learn more about you and to up-level their communication game?
Oh, great question. Thanks, Brandon. So 2 places. The best is right there on the screen, presentyourwaytosuccess.com. That's my website. There you'll be able to find all there is to know about me and what I do and who I help and how I can help folks. If you contact me and you say, hey, I heard the podcast. Well, I think we're going to have a link to this book here. That's my giveaway. Yep. Is everybody gets a copy of this. Just go to the link. And the other way to find me is on LinkedIn. And most days I am posting communication tips, tricks, tidbits, communication, how to get through some communication muddy spots. I'm posting just about every day. You can find that on LinkedIn. Look for David Doerrier.
I love it. David, thank you so much. Wherever you're watching and listening, all that stuff is down in the show notes below. LinkedIn, the free book, presentyourwaytosuccess.com. David, thanks for coming.
Thanks.
For those of you watching, listening, thank you. We'll see you on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Harmonious at Lunch podcast. Make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we want to invite you to join us in the Small Business Success Facebook group, our private group where guests and listeners come together to grow your business. We want impact-driven entrepreneurs who are ready to go to the next level in this group so we can all share ideas, collaborate, and grow our businesses together. Go to whatif.com/group, and we want to invite you to join today. See you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch.